Hey everybody, so we're here at Moonshine Church. We're at the Moonshine Cemetery. Right over there is the burial of one of the Moonshine descendants. It might even be, we'll take a peek at it, might even be the man himself that donated the land for the community. Because back then it wasn't just Greenpoint, you had St. Joseph Springs, which is where the murder of Joseph Raber happened. You also have the wife of Charles Drews, who was one of the two murderers who actually committed the murder. And then you also have, I think it's Franklin Ditzler, his parents. He was the other murderer. His parents are buried here. But there's an interesting character here that is buried. His name's Joseph Johns. We've talked about him before. He was a beloved member of the community. He was an escaped slave. I believe it was around the mid-1800s he escaped from the Virginia area. And he had escaped with several other slaves, but he was the only one that could swim. So they had to cross the Susquehanna River to get there, to get across to be able to continue going on their road to freedom. Unfortunately, the other two guys could not swim and they got caught, whereas Joseph Johns didn't. He eventually, I think he settled in the Harrisburg region to do different types of work, woodwork, and then eventually he settled in this area. And he sort of traveled between here and Greenpoint because he did Collier work, which was making charcoal, and he also worked for, I believe it was the Susquehanna and Dauphin Railroad over across Second Mountain. And that is where some of those towns like Cold Springs, Yellow Springs, and Roush Gap were, a bunch of coal mining towns, that type of stuff. So we'll turn this around. We'll show you Joseph Johns' marker. Just wanted to refresh your memory a little bit about him. He's a really cool guy, and then we'll talk a little bit more about him down at the memorial at Bayshore Scout Reservation. So let's turn this around. And here it is, Joseph Johns. He was born, it was late 17, I think it was like 1790, and he lived till 1906. They think he was between 111, 110, somewhere like that, and 100, possibly 116. You know, unfortunately, the records for like people that were slaves, they weren't accurate, but he had said that he remembered the death of George Washington, so he would have had to be at an age where he could actually remember that. I believe George Washington died in 1798. I'll clarify that at the end if I have that wrong. But there were a couple different things that he remembered that makes you think he may have very well been born, you know, at that, because I can't quite read the date. But so he's a really intriguing character. I'll talk about it here, because this all has to do with this haunted history video. We've done one here before with Joseph Raber, talked about his murder and all the stuff with the Blue-Eyed Six. We'll just quick go over here. We'll come back here at some point because I want to do this whole cemetery and find a few of those other noteworthy graves. All of them are noteworthy, but I think these are some of the original flagstones, because the original church was actually back much further, and there was a cemetery that was back there, and a bunch of these are the stones. The people are probably still buried back over there, but these are a bunch of the stones that had been over there. So this is Henry Moonshine, 1760 to 1836, is in memory, and his wife Regina. His will allotted this acre of Union Township land as a free cemetery for Union Township, Lebanon County, PA, in 1856. Citizens' contributions in 1937 provided this monument in gratitude for his service to the community. So this is Henry Moonshine. Yeah, this is his monument to his burial. But he was the one that donated this land. He was a pretty well-off citizen of this area. And a lot of these towns, like St. Joseph Springs, Thomastown, this was a much poorer area. This was sort of the upper land area where the farms were, which wasn't as rich, fertile soil as, say, other areas of Lebanon County. So a lot of poor people out here, they didn't really have the money. And as evidenced by a lot of the people had flagstones. They didn't have actual gravestones. So who all these people are, we'll probably never know. But they were all important and loved by somebody. But anyways, so we're going to go down to Camp Bayshore, the Scout Reservation, at the monument for Joseph Johns, and then we'll talk about the haunted event that happened. Thanks, everybody. Alright, so we are back here at Bayshore Scout Reservation. Here's the Lake Bayshore. Really beautiful, but it's private property. You're not supposed to go onto it. They rebuilt the Joseph Johns cabin, like the Collier's cabin. Where it is exactly, I don't know. I'll try to get a picture of it off the internet and put it up so you can see what Collier's cabin would have looked like. It was a pretty basic type thing. And Joseph Johns had one here. There was a farmer that owned this land at the time, and they took care of him and allowed him to build that here. And he did his Collier's work. But here it is, dedicated in memory of Joseph Johns, born into slavery in Fauquier, it's a French pronunciation, I'm sure, County, Virginia, 1794. Escaped north, arriving in Dauphin County around 1844, came to the Greenpoint area and lived on the farm owned by John Collier. Joe's home was a hut a half-mile south of this point. He died in February 1906 at the age of 112. And so that's like the thing, it's like he's either born 1790 or 1794, because they question, would he at 4 years old remember vividly the death of George Washington in 1798? And that's sort of where, if he was 1790, it's more believable that he would. So he could have been as old as 116. He's buried in the Moonshine Cemetery, which we were just at. And so this site is maintained by the Boy Scouts. This was erected in 1993. So one of the things that they had going on back then in the 1840s, 1850s, and through into the Civil War period, which is awful, they had an escape slave law that as a bounty hunter, you could go and grab basically any person that was African American. Didn't matter whether they were an escaped slave or not. They could be free and had been born free and all that. And they could basically go north, grab them, take them south, and they got a bounty for it. It's really awful, and it's a shameful period of time for this country. But so they had bounty hunters looking for him. And the story goes, which I think is awesome, like a lot of Lutherans in this area, Germans, but they were more like pacifist, if you will. They fought for what they thought was right, but they were not the types that were like out like, hey, let's go have a fight, let's have a brouhaha. They were pretty calm people that kept to themselves. They farmed. They were very peaceful. But these guys came north. They heard about Joseph Johns, and they decided they were going to come and they were going to get him. Well, all the farmers in this area got together and had a standoff with him and basically said, if you don't leave, you know, you're not going to leave standing. You're going to be dead. You're going to be 6 feet under. And word got out. The guys left. They went away and they never came back. So it was cool that the community here in Greenpoint stood up for Joseph Johns and did that for him. So that's the story of Joseph Johns, wanting to refresh. And it was somewhere south here. And once again, this is private property. This is Boy Scouts of America camp. You're not allowed to go on the property. That's just, you have to sign in, and even then you don't go wherever you want. That's just how it is. So I'm very cognizant of that and saying that, because I don't want anybody going and seeing. But I will see if I can find a picture of that hut, just so you guys can get a general idea of what it actually looked like. So now we're going to go to the story. So let's flip this around and talk about it.
Hey everybody, so this is going to be, I had been at Bayshore and I had filmed a section on the actual ghost story, if you will, and sort of had gotten some stuff, the story not as good as it was supposed to be, so I'm going to tell it here. Pretty cool story. I had a couple of things wrong I had not remembered correctly, and so I wanted to redo it here. And so the story we talked about Joseph Johns, it was referred to as the story of Old Black Joe. Now, they don't use that terminology anymore just because of being insensitive, but that was the story that went on with the Boy Scouts. Now, the young man who was at the site, they have this hut, and I'm going to have a picture up of that at the end of the video so you can see what those Collier huts actually looked like. But they had, his project was to rebuild this hut as close as they could to what it would have looked like and where it would have been, because the exact location, I'm not sure if they were completely aware of, but this was a story that they used to tell. And so this kid was up there working on this hut, and he had his tools all over the place. He was had a bunch of stuff that he was going to burn, and he decided to stay. I'm going to stay overnight in his hut because he put all this work into it, and he thought, it'll be easier than in the morning. I can start right up and get everything cleaned up and finished, and it'll be done. So he was getting ready to go to bed. He was gonna light a little bit more of the stuff that was there on fire to create a little fire, and all of a sudden he started to feel like something's not right. So he started feeling something, hearing something, and all of a sudden he clearly started hearing, "Go away, go away." It sounded along the lines like, "I don't want you here. You're not wanted here. Go away." And then things started to get thrown around and all kinds of stuff. And of course, kid freaked out, like, what's going on? Am I hearing things? And it was very clear. And eventually, he got out of there. So he told everybody about this, and everybody was sort of laughing at him like he's making this up. This is just a ghost story trying to freak people out and whatnot. So they decided, well, we'll go up with you to where this camp is, where the hut, he was building the hut. So I went up there. Lo and behold, all the rest of the stuff that he had been setting up to burn had been burnt. The tools had been all placed together, and they had also, the whole site had been cleaned up. Like, it had been cleaned up, made nice, and everything. And nobody had an explanation for it. So, was this the ghost of Joseph Johns? Because he was known for not wanting people around because, he had been an escaped slave, as we had talked about in the video. And he sort of just wanted to be left alone because the fear with the escaped slave law and all that other kind of stuff. That's just sort of how he was when he was by himself, when he was in an encampment like the Collier huts. It was something that he would rather be left alone in those times. Like, he was very amicable and very kind and got along with people well when he was around people. But when he was by himself, he wanted to stay by himself because the fear was somebody was going to come and get him. So, makes sense, or was somebody messing with the kid? I don't know. I mean, it's from the way it sounds, something was going on, but it makes for a great ghost story. It's like, so what was it? Was it the ghost of Old Black Joe? Was it Joseph Jones? Or was it something else? I don't know. But that is the story of the possible ghost of Joseph Johns, where his Collier's hut was rebuilt, and apparently he wanted to keep that to himself, and nobody else was supposed to be around. So whether anything has happened since, doesn't sound like, but it is a story they like to tell up at Camp Bayshore, along with another one, which our next haunted history story we will tell this next story, which I'm not going to give anything away about, but it's great. It is great. So with that, I want to say thank you, and next you will see the picture of the hut, the Collier's hut for Joseph Johns. Thanks, everybody. So I couldn't find a picture of the new Collier's home for Joseph Johns, but this is what it would have looked like. And this is Joseph Johns himself, so you can actually see a picture of him. It just, unfortunately, I couldn't find anything. I'm sure they're out there, but this is what it would have looked. It was pretty much, it was a hut going into the ground type of thing, and it wasn't real substantial living, so it had to be a pretty rough life. But these Colliers would have these huts all over the place, just because they'd be burning this charcoal at different places around. But this is what it would have looked like, and this is the man himself. So as always, I want to say thank you for coming along, and we will see you all about town.